We are going to take a look at activity 8 on the Total Eclipse Choice Board. This activity is titled Totality Craft, and this is one that shouldn't take too much time with students, but a great representation for them to have with the total solar eclipse event itself. So the end result will look much like this with your sun, moon, earth, all on a brad. There are some limitations that might have to be addressed within this model, as we know with most models. And so just making sure to provide that clarification for students through this activity. So your standards that you have here are for K through high school astronomy. That way you can include those in your lesson plans and have them aligned to those science standards. We also have long-term goals. So what you want students to recognize, the 5 phases of the total solar eclipse. And then for students to know that there are 3 types of eclipses, and that the total solar eclipse is the one that happens when the moon is close enough to Earth to where it appears to entirely cover the sun. We also have a couple of misconceptions that are listed. One of those being kind of like I said, with the moon appearing to cover the entire sun. We know that the sun and the moon are not the same size. One of those limitations to address within this model, because they appear the same size when you're creating the model. So a misconception to discuss with students. The moon's actually 400 times smaller than the sun, but the sun is 400 times further away. So that's why when we go or observe a total solar eclipse, it appears that the moon is completely covering that sun up, and as if they are the same size. So materials for this activity. There is a student sheet that I'll scroll down to here in a second that can be printed on white cardstock. You'll need some brads, black cardstock for the strips to hold the sun and the moon. And then whatever you want students coloring with, crayons, markers, colored pencils, and then scissors and some glue. So before students cut their sun, earth, moon out, they'll need to either color strips of black or just cut off strips of black paper that are both the same size so that they can attach their sun and their moon. And it's really important to have students create these black strips the same size so that as they are having their moon revolve and go around the earth, once it passes in front of the sun, it is the same size, and it shows through the model that it is blocking out the sun in its entirety. That's one of those important components for this. So if students do have their strips of black paper that are holding the sun and moon in place, if those are different lengths, then you can still use those models to discuss with students why it would be a partial eclipse, or because it's not covering the sun in its entirety. So still a good conversation to have with students. The other portion of this that might be a huge limitation, and I'm going to go back up to this top image just because it's a little easier to see in color. So both the sun and the moon are connected to the earth with a brad. However, we know that the sun is stationary. It's not moving throughout this process. So you can do a couple things. You can glue just the back of the sun itself down on a piece of paper or in student notebooks. So that way, as you are having the moon revolve around the earth, as you're having it go through and pass over the sun, it is the only thing that's moving in this model. If you have students just hold it, make sure they're not moving the sun, and have that conversation about the limitations of this model. It's not a perfect representation, and we know that, but we also need to make sure we address that the sun is stationary. This model doesn't particularly allow for it to remain stationary. So it's one of those limitations that we need to make sure to address. This is a great activity, though, for all students so they can really see and have that model of what is happening as we experience totality.